Good evening. Good evening, dear friends, both in person and online. It's a great pleasure to welcome so many of you to this lecture tonight presented by Dr. Angelos Papadopoulos. It's a very intriguing topic, warfare in the Aegean Bronze Age and in historic Greece, and it's actually a very intriguing topic also because of its relevance to what the Norwegian Institute does. And it just brings to mind the hundreds of obsidian arrowheads and blades found in the Gourimadi excavation sites, both in and around. And Dr. Zafiriadis, my colleague at the NIA and co-director of the excavation, can say more about that later on. This lecture will focus on three main points. First, it's going to update us on current approaches regarding warfare in the Aegean Bronze Age. The second aspect is actually limitations and challenges by methodological issues. So we have some discussion on methodology. Third, it's going to attempt to reassess all the material on the basis of new discoveries in mainland Greece, Crete, and the Aegean Islands. A note of proper introduction is in order. Angelos is an archaeologist, first and foremost, and he's a faculty member of college here in Athens. Angelos has obtained his PhD from the School of Archaeology, Classics and Egyptology at the University of Liverpool. He has an MA from UCL in archaeology and a BA, again in archaeology, from the University of Warlords in the UK. He has been working during his PhD times, working on iconography of warfare, but later on, as I have understood, he shifted his attention a bit to a broader topic, namely cultural interactions between the Aegean, Cyprus, and the Levant, focusing on trade, diplomacy, and art exchange. Angelos has also an impressive publication record, we have to say that. And he has also been conducting fieldwork in Greece, in the UK, and Cyprus. He has also a very interesting research record and research activity. He has organized 4 international conferences in Athens, Dublin, and Nicosia. And he's actually working on the publication of Mycenaean and Cypriot pottery from the sites of Ein Gomi, Kourion, and Tel El-Hessi in Israel. He's also completing a short monograph on his favorite topic, warfare in the Aegean Bronze Age, the topic of tonight's lecture. So with this, I would like to warmly welcome you, Angelos. It's an honor for the Institute to have you here and listen to your very interesting ideas about warfare. The floor is yours. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right. Hello, everybody. First of all, thank you for the kind words, far too many kind words. And I have to say a big thank you as well, because it is a cold night for the Greek standards, not the Norwegian standards, obviously. And also realized a few minutes ago, it's also a derby night. Panathinaikos and Arsenal are both playing tonight. So thank you for being here also for that. I'll try and be quick and go and watch these games. 7:30, damn it. Anyway, never mind. So thank you for coming once again. And I'll try and do everything that you just heard in like 50 minutes. So that's a challenge. By the way, well done for remembering all this, by heart. So thank you once again. Now, because I literally finished the PowerPoint a few minutes ago, because I kept changing what we're going to discuss, how I'm going to do it, what I need to tell you. Initially, the idea was the all-time classic from chronological order, from the Neolithic to the late Bronze Age, things happening. I decided not, this is pointless within like 50 minutes. After all, we have so many publications I'm going to briefly mention. So if you want to refer to the evolution of the sword, of the helmet, of the shield, it's no reason to do this now. Instead, I thought I should actually focus on some highlights, some questions, some problems, because I've been working on warfare through iconography, as you just heard, my main interest over the well, it's almost 20 plus years now. Again, time flies. So I thought I should probably introduce you or remind you some of the topics that are spicy and based on the ideas that need to be explored. Methodologies and current approaches will also be discussed. Again, I cannot discuss everything. There's no way to mention everything. So it's going to be an all but exhaustive discussion. Obviously, there are things like religious depositions of weapons or topics regarding linear B. A whole lecture can become linear B, but obviously I'm going to do some highlights only, and during the Q&A, hopefully we'll move on, and of course maybe afterwards. So the whole idea is to talk about warfare in the Aegean Bronze Age, very ambitiously starting from the Neolithic all the way to the collapse of the palaces in the late Bronze Age. What I need to tell you following the, give me a sec. No, I think maybe I should stick with that. Yes. The idea of studying warfare, studying violence, studying warfare and violence goes back a long time, especially regarding Northern Europe, regarding other places in the world. Of course, the Keely's book in 1996, War Before Civilization, is really a key moment, a landmark, if you like, in the studies of warfare. But apart from the many conferences, the many workshops, endless papers in various journals or contributions to, again, to conferences, people began to really solidify their work and focus on warfare, let's say the past 30 years. In the Aegean especially, I have to say that although people really think that the Polemos volume, the next slide, after the very famous Polemos warfare conference in the Aegeum series in 1998 in Liège, obviously, there are attempts to gather together the data, primarily visual, seal stones, wall paintings, obviously the swords, obviously the helmets and so on. But the idea goes back to either cataloging the swords by Ima Killendelmeyer in 1994, for example, although notably there are many objects missing. I think it's a matter of copyrights. So unless I'm mistaken, there is not the catalog from the swords from the soft grades at Mycenae, so it's the rest. Or even beyond that, before that, about 20 years before that, you have Buchholz and his colleagues working on archaeological Homerica, and you have an attempt to bring together the information, again, visual and material culture, and make things more understandable, more digestible. But for the Aegean Bronze Age especially, obviously, the big bang happens with the publication of the Polemos volume. Several well-known professors, students of the past, people who specialize in the Aegean Bronze Age, not necessarily in technology of weapons or anything else, they would present their ideas in Liège. This volume is literally the landmark, and for me, it's a stepping stone when I was an undergrad about, oh, this was published, and maybe I can focus on something, and slowly but gradually, I thought the iconography of warfare, again, based on this publication, it's something worth exploring. And the reason is because, as we'll discuss in the methodological limitations very soon, even today, even with the publication of a companion by Brill, literally on warfare, discussing, and some of you have contributed to this volume here, discussing weapons technology, discussing fortification, warfare in Crete versus warfare in mainland Greece, warrior ethos, linear B, the Trojan War. So very selective, but step by step, if you like, discussion of various topics. So it seems that the Aegean Bronze Age is kind of exhausted as a theme. In fact, a student who wanted to do a PhD on the topic asked me a few months ago if this is the case, because this is what had been told. There's not enough. There's nothing more to study about Aegean Bronze Age warfare. I strongly disagree for the reasons you're going to see in a second. And these reasons are, some of these reasons are that methodologically we have problems. Some of them are inevitable. New excavations, new ideas appear, new objects appear. So we all know, or hopefully most of us have known or heard about the Griffin warrior tomb and the new data appearing. But generally speaking, even old studies or older studies present problems. So without being offensive or aggressive. I'll show you a couple of these problems during this lecture, but definitely the idea is that we need to be careful, and sometimes we need to evaluate our own studies or our colleagues' studies. For example, there are many drawings being used by many of us, and these drawings are literally what the modern artist sees, and sometimes these are problematic. Ingo Pini mentioned that when he was discussing the CMS volumes about the seal stones and the ceilings, how there are many problems, and they're trying at CMS to bring new drawings right now, better analysis and so on. But for example, seal stones is a very clear example, or even ceilings to make it worse about these things. The wall paintings themselves, and I'll show them to you in a second, we found them fragmentary. Sometimes people are in haste to identify what they see. Again, studying frescoes is a very intriguing topic, and I was very happy to work with very great colleagues over the years as an undergrad and as a postgrad. But again, especially the wall paintings are a big issue. Sometimes, again, it's inevitable. We're using data that fits our ideas. That's a very, again, it's not about being offensive, but many times there is an idea fix, as mentioned some years ago by Michael Vede. We already have a pre-agreed idea in our minds. This is what's happening, and that's the data to prove it. And sometimes we do ignore other data. For example, in case of fortifications in Crete, many discussions about how the so-called flower lovers, the peaceful Minoan, most likely that's not the case if you see the whole picture, if you don't stick in one category of objects. Which again, it's the next point about you cannot really focus on one period only, on one region only. You have to see the greater picture, and sometimes the new finds will cancel your previous ideas. By holistic approach, very trendy these days, it's exactly that. You need to go in all fields, and that's what Jan Driessen actually mentioned in his keynote lecture at the Polemos volume. And finally, definitely one need to consider what we call poor interpretation, poor preservation of the objects, and especially of images. There's a soft spot in my heart about iconography, obviously, so I'm going to show you only two things. So here, for example, these are two figures, human figures, with what we may call them wearing as a hedgehog helmet. You can see the spiky bits on their heads. They're both pictorial craters from the post-Palatial period, late Helladic 3C, right? But if you have the rest of the vase, apart from these two fragments, many, many times you have just fragments, obviously. But in that case, if somebody goes and thinks, right, these are the typical hedgehog, so-called hedgehog helmets, you can even go all the way to sea people and so on, discuss these things. But then you realize that's not really the case. Top left, you can see the crater from Kinos, Livanates, showing indeed warriors holding the shield, maybe facing each other. By the way, this is a brand new thing in late Helladic 3C, the fighting on board of ships. But the latter one, the bottom one, is coming from 3C Naxos, I believe. I don't think I'm wrong. And literally, these are fishermen. So what I'm saying is, although in that case, you do have the whole figure, and that's in many cases, you have only a limited part of the body, misinterpretation is very, very easy. Sometimes, if this is inevitable, sometimes we go beyond that and we apply contemporary perspectives and ideas. This is the so-called, again, I think Evans coined the term for this person, the captain of the blacks. You can see a red-skinned individual, most likely from New Pallas, Crete, although from Knossos, although dating those frescoes is hell on earth, but the fact is they seem to belong to Neopalatial Knossos. So there is a person holding two javelins, question mark, running to a certain direction, and in different backgrounds, white and blue, we seem to have evidence of people with black skin, and automatically the idea is that you have maybe African troops, African soldiers, African whoever following the leader. To be honest, if you think this goes back to early 20th century, it does not. Literally from a PhD from 1990, you see the statement that the Knossos fresco, this one you just saw, represents a clear leader. So you have the elite person leading a row of armed men. People have discussed if he's hunted by those men, but the fact is, let me go back, we're missing the top, the bottom, the left, the right. And Fritz Blackholmer, and I'm grateful for seeing this before he actually published it. Now it's very well published some years ago. He did present that following the very Egyptian convention of different colored people, simply to show how they're packed. If you see Egyptian wall paintings and you see soldiers, they're so close to each other, they need to paint them red, black, so they differentiate. This is obviously, there's a big gap between the two, but quite likely this could be the artistic convention misread by the prehistoric Aegean artists. I'm not saying this is the answer. This is food for thought about how you read fragmented frescoes. So both suggestions, but not necessarily the truth. Jan Driessen, in his keynote speech, once again, highlighted 5 main ways, 5 main categories of studying Aegean Bronze Age warfare. And again, I personally followed them for a long time, especially the middle one on iconography, obviously. Linear B can tell us a few things, but as you all know, linear B, it's no more than, okay, maybe it is more than shopping lists, but basically we have names, we have individuals, we have productions of chariot wheels, okay, several thousands of them, arrowheads, you have discussions about bronze, about the practice called tarasigia, more about that later. But, for example, the shields are notoriously absent from linear B tablets. So what I'm saying is that you can use literary sources, but up to a point. Weapon technology, analysis of the weapons, something that later will be termed as weapons grade bronze, come to mind. What is the sequence, the typology, what is actually the evolution of the sword, the evolution of the shield, several studies about that. Fortifications, where do they appear, which walls are actually for fortifications or terrace walls and all these kind of approaches. Iconography, you'll see a lot of that later. And of course, burial practices. Trigger warning, the next slide will be about a person who is dead in his tomb. So this person, I'll show you the skeleton, I hope you're okay with that. So contrary to the grave circle A inhabitants, I like grave circle B, just for the sake of it. And you can see a pretty large sword on the left. So you can study the skull for any perimortem, if you like, injuries. You can see the body for extra strong legs, leading, for example, the Kokonaries case about the person being a horseman. So human remains not only can tell us the cause of death, not only can tell us about the age and maybe the practice of that individual, but the burials itself talk us about the famous weapons in the graves, making many scholars calling those graves as warrior graves. Again, this can be easily discussed or debated because how you define actually a warrior grave, that's not new. Scholars have discussed about this and published. And of course, from the tombs, you can see swords. Again, going back to the previous point about weapon technology, you can talk about all kinds of practices. Arrowheads go back in Stone Age and so on. So these are basically the 5 categories that Jan thought it's a very good idea to start with. But obviously, there are more, there's more technological approaches, new ideas, new techniques over the years adding to our knowledge. But as I said, this is something that gives you a pretty good idea about what's happening. So what I'd like to do in the next few slides is discuss how things started from at least my perspective. Feel free to challenge it. I love a good fight, especially in conferences or meetings like this. Do feel happy to disagree. And as I said, this is what, over the years, this is something that I thought is useful in order to approach warfare from a different perspective. And probably the best way to do this is to realize how and why people fight. Well, I'm not going to go about violence as a behavior. I will not talk about warfare as an expression of ideologies or whatever, but I will go very practically and go all the way back to the Neolithic period and discuss about possibly inequality as one source of warfare. Perhaps very simplistically, the idea is that during the farming revolution, if it is a revolution and not a very indigenous process, but that's another story. So during the farming, if you like, activities of the Neolithic people, we begin to have collection of surplus. We begin to have pithoi, we begin to have use of land, and maybe the idea of using land to cultivate and have crops is the reason for inequality. Of course, a recent book by Wengrow and Greber challenged this idea about inequality in our species. Starts with the Neolithic revolution, and the minute people cultivate the land becomes precious, so you have landowners, so inequality, so you have surplus, and the result is certain people who don't have that turn to warfare. This seems to be challenged because of excavations suggesting that for millennia, in the East at least, we had farmers coexisting in identical houses, similar, if you like, material culture, no sense of hierarchy, as we will see it later. But again, this is a pretty interesting view. But in any case, warfare can be connected to inequality whenever this started. Especially for Thessaly, two ways to read the fortifications, either, the pretty massive stone walls in the Minian Sesklo, either as fortifications, pretty thick, pretty tall, or you can read them, according to another school of thought, as ways to separate the land between the farmers. Obviously, the presence of slingshots, like the ones on the top right, do indicate some signs of warfare, attack. There are no methods at the time, but the fact is, personally, I tend to believe the idea that these places have also had the function of these walls was to protect surplus people and the leaders question mark, but definitely it's more of a defensive character than anything else. Maybe it's not coincidental that in the final Neolithic at Andros, we have encrusted on the wall, not painted nor engraved, but encrusted by using rocks. On the exterior wall near the gate of the settlement, I believe it has a double wall over there, we begin to have longboats, boats that we will meet again in the early Cycladic period. So already in the Neolithic period, you have a combination of art with boats, animals, hunting, question mark, especially if you have the hounds, if these are hounds. And definitely you have ships on the fortification wall. So maybe, according to modern scholarship, the idea is the power of the community, how they travel could be either trade or anything else. If the longboat can be used for fighting at sea, it's a bit early to say, but definitely we have mobility of people, so who knows. But the fact they are actually on the fortification wall, visible by the visitor or whoever, should be touching some strings. Moving to one of my favorite periods for this kind of case, the early Cycladic period, we have several of these figurines, primarily male, one exception, and the only safely excavated, safely found in an Aegean Bronze Age context is now in the Archaeological Museum, the National Archaeological Museum, downtown. It is a statue, a headless statue. I don't have a picture right here, with a baldric, like the ones you can see there, both with a phallus and breasts. Everything else is male, but they all come from private collections. Or in that case, the left was acquired by the British Museum some years ago, while the other one on the right is a drawing of the so-called Perditus. It is one of these warrior hunters, baldric and a dagger engraved, lost forever from the British Museum again. I have no idea where this is. Hopefully it will stay there if this rings a bell. But the fact is that the reason I think it's very interesting to study these figurines, not only because they are exceptional, there are no more than 10 on the published record, maybe they're more in a luxurious lounge in Manhattan, but the fact is that these figurines, like 10, 12 in number in total, they seem to appear when these bronze daggers appear in EC2 in the Cyclades. This is another famous warrior hunter from the Goulandris Museum. And I'm very much inclined to believe, to maybe slightly change the view by Leroy-Gourand, that we now have the appearance of men at arms. I'm also very much attracted by the idea that the warrior ethos, the warrior status, appears globally, not only in Greece or in Cyprus or the Levant. When trade appears, caravans appear, why not sea routes appear, and these armed individuals are responsible for protecting the cargo, protecting the safety of the caravan, protecting the economy. I'm a big fan of this idea, and I'll try to persuade you as time goes by. And definitely the idea is that these warrior hunters may represent indeed warriors with that purpose. Of course, why hunters? I belong to the group believing that you cannot separate fighting from hunting, in art at least. The weapons can be similar, the art can be similar. You see the same people in Mycenaean frescoes hunting boar, the same people killing each other. But in fact, if you go from the anthropological perspective, killing an animal, killing your opponent kind of co-works. Anyway, beyond that, this is also the time, EC2, of great fortifications. That's Castrion Syros with the horseshoe wall towers, as you can see, bastions, and also the exterior wall. Also from the same period, very weird narrative. That's from a very old publication, so it's only drawings I can show you. From a farm, supposedly, at Corfita Renew in Naxos, showing top left, perhaps an individual dragging, stealing. Is it a raid? Is it trade? If he's holding a bow, who knows what's the story? Anyway, pushing a goat in what seems to be a longboat, while the bottom right, you can choose dancing or fighting or boxing. Is this person there? Let me see if this works. Yep. If this is a club or an extended hand, I mean, come on, artistic license, right? So what I'm saying is there are candidates for both narrative and maybe short stories to be represented. There were more than that. Not all of them are connected to warfare, most likely creating like a small freeze in this farm, again, in Naxos. When you realize what you want to look for, you find things. So this is basically the work conducted at Astipale at Vathi, when a team led by Andreas Vlachopoulos and Ioannina, literally you can see on the rocks, not in houses, but on the entrance of the settlement, a harbor, you can see both the same longboats you saw before, and to the right, I know it's not the best picture ever, what seems to be daggers. Now there's a connection between boats and daggers, boats and fortification walls, boats and individuals, armed individuals. This seems to be the case, a nice blend in EC2. So I really think that the idea of the warrior, or more politically correct, the individual with arms, maybe it's not a warrior yet, appears at that time. Regarding warfare, we do have, of course, the appearance of the first swords, unless I'm mistaken, in Crete, type A and type B, leading to more problems as new discoveries appear. For example, why on earth we have this horde of type A, I believe, swords, 18 of them found in the palace, I think, most scholars now think this is the earliest palace in the mainland, at Agios Vasilios in Laconia. So they were found all together. I personally am not aware of any recent updates. Maybe you can enlighten me if there's something new on them. But for example, why you have this old type of swords in a very later context. This is from the mainland palatial times. Going back to Crete and the Middle Bronze Age, not much to say, some seal stones showing archers, individuals like that person holding daggers. Now, is this a very Cretan thing to have a dagger in your waist? Is it a weapon? Is it a symbolic dagger to do whatever? Who knows? No weapons yet, sorry, no swords yet. And by the way, this religious context, they were found in pig sanctuaries, could be indicative, could be not. However, sticking with the Middle Bronze Age, I think the biggest event is the appearance at Colonna on Aegina, this lovely double harbored site on the island of Aegina. Literally under the Temple of Apollo, many fortification walls, and the site has given a wealth of mid-Bronze Age goodies regarding warfare. For example, pithoi with individuals holding spears, most likely. Again, ships, there must be something between islands and ships. Although Aegina is more of a mainland site in terms of culture and ideology, it's still an island. Maybe the earliest state in the Aegean, as people have argued in the past. But definitely the iconography is interesting, followed during the next town of Colonna by, of course, the famous Colonna warrior. People now argue it's not exactly a soft grave, but maybe it is. But the fact is, I believe it is the earliest testimony of a very long sword, together with other material, including a Bostas helmet, appears in a tomb. And from that point onwards, we see many of them. Art also continues to be related to the topic. In the following period, new palace creates not much in terms of narratives, but depends what you're looking for. So frescoes, very bad preservation of frescoes. Remember the possibility of the Captain of the Blacks being, in fact, a from the Palatial period. But the fact is, ceilings and some seal stones, again, big debate if this is a hunting scene or a person about to slay, the one running, I'm thinking about the bottom one. Or so if this is a fighting scene, and that's my own idea, by the way, but primarily stone rita from steatite, notoriously hard to carve, to work on, showing boxing scenes, showing violent scenes, showing attack scenes, if this person on the bottom right is in fact an archer aiming towards the top of the vase. Maybe he's trying to do an attack from the sea, not clear, but the fact is we do have bits and pieces suggesting for both hunting and fighting scenes narratives. But they're all portable. They're all small. They are all maybe individual orders. At the same time, in mainland Greece, and this is where some of our work appears with Nikos Sepetzoglou, portable objects are now being buried with the elite, if you like, individuals with all their gold, 16 kilos, I believe, or so, found in the soft graves by Henrik Schliemann. So objects in the soft graves really show us a tendency, not only the weaponry, but also the iconography to reflect military prowess. Real military prowess or projected military prowess. Narrative, however, now is far more official. This is a digital deconstruction, I'm afraid, of the Siege Riton. We didn't break down the real thing. This has been conserved and reworked in 2014, I believe, from the conservators, the skilled conservators of the National Archaeological Museum. So together with Nikos Sepetzoglou, we went together, took, I don't know, a gazillion of photos. Then we literally broke down into pieces, and we suggested a couple of changes in the fragments. But the main idea is that you have a narrative of a fortified city with closed gates, coastal town most likely, being attacked or something like that from the sea. That's pretty much well known, but my point is these objects were used as offerings in tombs. So I'm very happy personally to accept that they're still holding the idea of individual prowess. If this was custom made or not, probably it was quite unique so far, but not the theme. The theme is not unique. Contemporary Acroterion Thera, probably being receiving earthquakes as we speak. Hopefully nothing wrong will happen again. Literally, this is the from the West House of Akrotiri, the very well-known fresco of the flotilla fresco, the ship fresco, you name it, but it is exactly the same thing. You have what seems to be, and this has been discussed many times, so I'm not going to be focusing on that a lot, broken antennas, most likely people are dying or drowned, rocky landscape. This way you can see a town, warriors marching. And by the way, let me go back to the methodological concerns. This is the reconstruction during Marinatos times, spiritual Marinatos, when they put together all the objects, all the fragments, and then Christina Televandou proved that no, there is more. Okay, we have more warriors and maybe some more fragments, but the main idea is the same. You have warriors, most likely on a different episode, on a later time. If it's a sequence, you land the boats, you have a fight, then the victorious invader, question mark, is about to enter this city. Similar idea. And even the context, although it's not on a portable object, it is in a private house, the West House, and it is meant to be part of the very luxurious living room, the guest house, or the area where the guests will arrive and discuss business with the local merchant, or as we say, the captain of the fleet. It's one idea about the West House, but again, I don't want to go into known things. Seemingly, this kind of art, this kind of portable violent iconography continues in the following century. You've seen, of course, the Griffin warrior, very famously not having pottery. Several seal stones, I think about 40, which is the largest assemblage of seal stones after Vafio. Anyway, swords, weapons, a single individual, male buried there. And the iconography, of course, helps a lot to understand that the idea of this individuality remains. So, although, of course, a big question, and maybe a next project for us will be who can actually see these seal stones, who can actually see and read these little gold rings. I'd like to discuss them like Rolex. So if you're wearing a Rolex, does this make you a very wealthy person? Okay, maybe not nowadays, but back in the day, Rolex was a big thing, I guess. So would a luxurious watch make you a wealthy person? Or because you're a wealthy person, you're expected to have this luxurious watch? So same thing, the combat gate. Are you expected as a mighty warrior to have this in your repertoire? Or this will make you a very powerful warrior? Or if weapons are connected to the elites, a very powerful individual. Mind you, if I understood correctly, even for the photo you're seeing in front of you, Jeff Vanderpool had to take several shots, and I believe this is the result. It's not one single photo on top of the object. I believe they had to take several shots with different lightings to produce this, unless I'm mistaken. So what I'm saying is, even to the skilled eye of the archaeologist, the scene is not very clear. Again, challenging the idea that if you see somebody wearing or holding this seal stone, which is about that big, automatically you realize, he's a warrior. Maybe yes, maybe no. But going back to narrative, the narrative remains the same. Shaft grave, tombs, the mighty swords person, Pylos warrior, Griffin warrior, the same narrative about a century later. To go beyond art, of course, citadels with a dual function. On one hand, they are to protect the surplus, in that case, glass, most likely being in the middle of the Copais Valley fertile area to gather the surplus. At the same time, the sheer thickness of the walls at Mycenae, they go up to 8 to 10 meters, 4 to 6 meters in thickness. At the time of no siege warfare as we know it, no catapults, no rams of that type, really makes us wonder if there is more than that. And of course, there's more than that. And now new approaches have shown how laborious this is, thanks to Anne Brisbert. And I'll talk about this towards the end, which is coming very soon, time-wise. So the same walls appear in many places. This is the Mycenaean, if you like, the so-called Cyclopean, maybe not so Cyclopean, but definitely Mycenaean fortification wall at Athens. And you realize that this is more of a code than just walls to defend yourself. Of course, many papers, many experimental attempts, discussions about cuirasses, attempts to figure out if this has been used by the individual who had it, the owner, or not really. Sometimes people go and produce that. Chariot warfare is another thing that, of course, requires discussion. The chances that in the rocky terrain of Greece, there's no case to have great battles like in Egypt or Asia. We don't have the terrain, to put it simply. Going back to 1980s, maybe it is a very nice limo, your taxi to take you to the battle. And then really, is this person about to do that or simply to appear, go and fight, and then watches? No idea. But regarding the weight, I know in here some experts, I can tell more about that. So images like this can be, if you like, misleading. Obviously, popular archaeology, popular books and magazines on archaeology, they really die, literally, to see this kind of scenes appearing. But archaeologically speaking, based on the material culture, that's not really a possibility, at least for my standards, especially if you have one and only chariot hunting scene, not even battle scene, and that's from one gold ring at Mycenae, nothing else. Never again you're going to see people fighting or hunting from a chariot in the Bronze Age. Linear bit tablets, useful about quantities, about locations. The fasgana, the swords, they appear, we have lists. The palaces seem to be involved. The palaces seem to be giving their own bronzesmiths, because in the mainland palatial times, 14th, 13th centuries BCE, we do have workshops controlled by palaces, most of them being within the vicinity of the palaces, and the bronzesmiths are given certain amounts of bronze to develop, actually, to deliver back certain amounts of deliverables. So we are guessing that there was a system of controlling how much bronze I give you, how many products I get back, to put it plainly and roughly. But from now on, things are a bit different in arts. Now we have large halls, we have walls with images of fighting, not necessarily the megara themselves, the throne rooms themselves. That is the case at Mycenae. Battle scene, maybe no, again, another project. If indeed you have a battle scene or simply warriors, because we don't have a real battle so far from the evidence at Mycenae, but we do have warriors and chariots, okay? We have hunting scenes at Tiryns. We have this battle scene, by the way, that's a reconstruction by Pete de Jong. It's not the fragmentary situation, of course, but that's quite accurate if you ask me, coming from Hall 64 at Pylos, next to the Megaron, in the old section, not in the new one. Who is to see this? What is to understand if you witness these wall paintings? Definitely far more people, a greater audience, can appreciate this art than in the soft grave era, as some people call it. You have only the small siegedritone and seal stones. Here you have more monumental, grand scenes of battle. Thoughts about us and the others, thoughts about class differentiation. Lang discussed what are the chances that in the palatial Mycenaean time you have people cladded in skins. Most likely it's an artistic license to depict the other, the enemy. By the way, we don't really know who is about to win the battle. I mean, seriously, look at that. From the fragments you don't have Pylian, if these guys are Pylian, superiority, just saying. But some people thought, let's take this painting and make this. And some people even go beyond and say that this is a battle that took place in certain areas, judging from the river. Although we don't have evidence for warfare in terms of destruction layers, we do have destruction layers, but whether this is the result of warfare or invasion is another topic, of course. But to my knowledge, we do have site abandonment in EC2 to EC3. We do have sites being abandoned. Of course, in 1200, a famous case is about the whole known world being on fire over a generation or so. But the fact is, we cannot say this is because of warfare, or I cannot say this is because of warfare. In the following period, from 1200 to roughly 1050, the post-palatial period, or like 3C, we don't have any luxurious items, no more gold, no more silver. The figure of 8 shield disappears, the boss's helmet disappears, and we do have the new medium, most likely pottery, different types of warriors, different types of fighting. We do have chariots, people carrying small round shields, many of them mobility. We don't see chariot warfare, we see mobility on chariots. For the first time, yes, we do have individuals fighting at sea, most likely, and one exception may be the same hand from Mycenae, an old shaft grave tombstone covered in plaster. You have the same warriors like this vase, but at the back, maybe the same hand, maybe not, but the fact is pottery is the prime material, both in the mainland and in the islands. The same ethos, but different power centers. Not very clear. But an innovation for my Italy standards in warfare practice is the fact you have either from Kinos or from Turkey, literally the same scene. By the way, I love that so much. You can see the dots out of the mouth. This person is yelling. This person is screaming, most likely. Anyway, the fact is that you can see the oarsmen there as well, individuals with all fully cladded with the shields, hedgehog helmets, question mark. But the fact is you have now a new type of warfare, fighting at sea, most likely, maybe not allowing your opponents to land. No ram. It's not like a sea battle as we know it from the classical periods, but definitely the use of boats is now far more prominent and far more visible. Is this for an audience? Is this the power of the community, like the wall paintings seem to declare the power of many versus the power of the individual from the previous tomb offerings? And now, of course, this raises new questions, and I'd like to offer some ideas. Economics of warfare, logistics of warfare. Literally, how much it costs to bring tin and copper to a certain workshop and produce that. Obviously, the weight is a problem because of oxidization. You cannot really weight the original thing, but we can do attempts. But the fact is, the values of silver and gold in the Near East and Egypt, work by Papasavvas in Cyprus and others, the presence of the need to have what we may call as weapons grade bronze. Not all bronze can make weapons. You need roughly 90% copper, 10% tin for the ideal ratio to make really strong swords. We now realize what it takes to transfer all that. The fact you can provide, that's my favorite example, literally the Cypriot king of Alassia, Cyprus, or part of Cyprus, not very known, although I think most scholars now disagree, Alassia is the whole of Cyprus, literally is complaining to the pharaoh as his equal, simply, if you ask me, because the Cypriot king can provide copper. Without copper, there's no bronze. No bronze, you have no army. So even the almighty pharaoh needs the Cypriot king to provide copper. So in politics, these two are equal, tiny Cyprus, huge Egypt, because of the copper trade. So I really think we need to focus on economy as well as technology. New ideas, new material appears. Again, work with Nikos Epetzoglou from Spourli in Thebes. I know this does not seem much, but it is chariot. We found like 3 of them. We suggest it's like 3 chariots, maybe with some people in between. I'm using this publicly available image because the material is not published yet. Hopefully we'll do this in the next few weeks or months. But the point is, chariots appear in Thebes, not from the palace, from the palatial area, but from the region, suggesting, as you might expect, these images must have been the standard repertoire in Mycenaean palatial sites. I'm not going to focus it on the palaces themselves, but the greater palatial area, if you like. So there is more. This was found in 1998, I believe. Oh, yeah, it's written actually. And 3,033 fragments were found. Many of them depict individuals and chariots. So we may have a similar scene like at Turin's of a procession. But again, the chariot is more than just an object. It is status, it is connected to the elites, and why not to warrior elites? Literally, new finds come day by day. Maybe it means nothing, maybe it means something. A Minoan, characterized as Minoan dagger, comes from the latest shipwreck we now found in the south of Turkey. This can enlighten us about who travels, what kind of technology travels. Don't forget the swords found in the Uluburu wreck. And of course, the same swords is not a new idea, but they've done this a lot in Britain and Italy, where this paper comes from. They do discuss if indeed those weapons have been used in battle. Don't forget the gold handles, the ivory handles in many of the weapons found in soft graves. Obviously, the evolution from type A, which is mostly to, or even not to actually kill somebody, depending which school of thought you follow. But definitely the evolution all the way to the famous Naue two-sword, a very much European import, initially in bronze, survives through the Iron Age, becomes made of iron. So this is really a killer, so they want to keep it. But not all the weapons have been designed to kill. In that case, we need these techniques, these approaches, and technology now is helping us to find out, for example, maybe one day if the very oxidized the Drakiras I showed you before has been indeed used for this kind of stuff. Economics, once again, on the fortification walls, an ERC project run successfully by Professor Anne Brisbert, the Set in Stone project. The question is indeed, how can you estimate the labor, the costs, the effort? It is still a pre-monetary society, but literally the amount of labor you need to apply to build these walls and to maintain them shows what a project this was. And you begin to think about, again, the economics of warfare, because yes, these walls have been constructed also for showing off, given the fact they're not easily to be destroyed, although they did not do much during 1200 BC, but that's another story. But again, by estimating working hours, distances, weight, experience through a very copious 5-year project. So maybe one of the most useful comments is that for these walls, because you can see they had a variety of case studies for this project. By the way, I literally found this morning, this paper, and presented that a few months ago in Athens, and literally they published it within a few months. Well done. So this is a very recent table. I haven't finished the whole paper yet to give you an idea, but definitely this table is very, very useful if you need 18 plus years to build these walls. Given the fact that you don't have really people being doing just that, you need farmers, you need potters. What I'm saying is this is a big investment. And if indeed these are walls for defense, you realize what it means to be building those defensive walls, at the same time propaganda statements. But definitely this kind of approaches, this kind of labor costs estimations, this kind of techniques to appreciate how long it takes to bring bronze from that place and how long it takes to build a wall makes us see, I believe, warfare differently. And last but not least, my favorite, warfare and trade, going back to the economics. We really have to think about warriors protecting trade, also trade needed to bring all these materials back and forth. I wish we had more examples like this, the so-called ingot gut from Encom in Cyprus, stepping on a small ingot. We know this ingot was added later. It was not initially there, but definitely the idea that you need warriors to protect your trade is very attractive to me. And for example, I thought that if you take the triptych of economy, which is production, distribution, consumption, including the necessary storage before it goes via the sea or via land to wherever, definitely invaders, looters, thieves can try and grab the products while stored or while in the move, and warriors have as their duty to protect that. Let me slowly close by saying that we have the old Assyrian colonies records from 1900 BC, where the older, experienced Assyrian merchant advises the younger Assyrian merchant, go from the main avenue. You will pay for the toll, you will pay for the fee, but your cargo will be protected because the local king will give you escort. military escort. And by the way, he could be upset if you take the side road, but that's another story. So the idea of military escorts is quite well recorded beyond the Aegean, so we may take advantage of that. However, contrary to the rest of the Eastern Mediterranean art, Aegean art of warfare seems to be quite different. We don't have the almighty warrior. We don't have the almighty pharaoh slaying everybody. We don't have people being decapitated. We don't have the menacing god in that case. So generally speaking, we don't really have a clear winner. We don't really have a clear figure standing out. So to wrap it up, warfare in terms of practice, art, objects, and so on, seems to be very Aegean in character in terms it has major differences to chariot warfare, does not exist. The almighty pharaoh does not exist, contrary to what you see in the East. Inequality, I think, is a big way to work. And let me go to the other part there. So if warfare and inequality, if warfare is the result of inequality, let's say land, then what about the impact of warfare and the following inequality? So if a defeated society and group loses its property, loses its metals, then what? How does this work? So literally the impact of warfare is something that I think also needs to be explored from the economic perspective. We do have cases that from the early late Bronze Age tombs and little small objects, you go to the more grandeur and monumental art. Really, how much warfare was actually happening? Later, philosophers debate if the projection of warfare reflects, mirrors actual warfare, or it's a threat. Look what I can do, and we stay there. Of course, you can discuss endlessly about economics, metals, stones, craftspeople, collaborations, and so on. And of course, new finds or revisiting the old material, it's something that has to be taken into consideration. And if you ask me, even before the Griffin Warrior, every single day, if you believe it, people have new ideas about all materials, new drawings, new techniques appear. So although these are some good points about warfare so far, and I think that new data will not really change drastically what we think about Bronze Age warfare, definitely new ideas and technologies can show us new paths and new routes. I think it took a bit longer than I expected. Thank you so much for your attention, and all the best.
So much for a multifaceted and very challenging, intriguing, interesting approach.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
I hope it made sense. Yes, please.
Oh, thank you very much for this fantastic and really rich tour of warfare and violence in the Aegean through ages. I particularly enjoyed that you connected to other aspects of sort of other changes that are happening, such as the establishment of the trade networks in the Aegean, or sort of the economy, and sort of drawing comparisons, particularly the drawing of a comparison with Amana letters, how economy affects social distances and how they tie into kind of the economies of warfare and sort of power. And on that note, I wanted to kind of allude to the title, which mentioned the Sling Throwers, who appear in Sesco and then kind of disappear. But once we look at the siege writing, they are clearly there,
exactly
still present. Yet our picture, so people who would constitute the bulk of an army, are kind of invisible, and we study warfare through kind of elite contexts, palatial and elite residences and palaces, linear B, fortifications of palaces, and so on, or graves with weapons. And I wanted to ask if there was any sort of more evidence prior to the 12th century BCE of that kind of the bulk of the what constituted Aegean armies. Is warfare in the Aegean how we look at it from the evidence, kind of some ritualized exchange of blows between elite warriors with swords, or is it a more mass phenomenon? What we see at Collinser in North Europe, but we just don't see that picture. Do we, for example, do we have any, say, slingshots from graves or anything that would indicate that warfare is happening also on that kind of lower, sort of in different social strata, involves people from different social strata?
Good point. Thank you. You're right. Contrary to later periods, archaic and classical, the weapons, and I'm guessing the armor and stuff, are kept by the palaces or the elites, not given to the people. I mean, if you think of the Athenian society with the middle class Athenians being the hoplites, that's a totally different story. We don't seem, if you believe the linear B tablets, we don't seem to have, for that period at least, people having the weapons. I'm guessing it would be very dangerous for the, I don't know, the elite. Now, before that, it's a good point. Personally, I do not know neither who owns the weapons, if everybody has a dagger or a blade or whatever other place. I would think not. I think we can follow the idea of the elites controlling the weaponry, but strictly speaking, cynically speaking, we can only say this with some certainty for the palatial times, not before that. And about the armies, I was always personally annoyed by the word because there were many publications for the wider audience, if you like, about the almighty Mycenaean army. I don't think we see armies. It's not until 3C when you actually see almost identically cladded individuals, almost the same clothing, you realize this is something. There's some homogeneity there. But for armies, that's why I'm using a lot of the term warriors and not soldiers, for example. I don't think, unlike Egypt, if you go back to the Middle Kingdom with the famous wooden groups of soldiers, literally under the king. Okay, there you have both the figurines and the texts. We don't have any evidence that I am aware of armies per se in the groups, especially, again, that's economics. If you consider the populations of each polity. Now, if you go for the idea that I believe only 3 people go for this so far about the the Mycenaean kingdom, you may consider certain people being like drafted. But if you ask me, for before linear B and the rest, I disagree with the idea of the armies. However, to annoy us, you have this frieze from Akrotiri from the West House showing marching warriors. Now, I'm very happy to accept these marching warriors are elite warriors, but not really armies. Now, what defines an army? I'm guessing the state character, the obligation to do it for some time, under the specific person. Again, maybe you can say something about that for the Lauagetas if he's a general in the linear B tablets. But again, before, everything is invisible. I can only say with certainty, at least from my standards, that the low numbers of the Cycladic Islands, of the populations I mean in the Cycladic Islands, even at Mycenae, I don't think an army is an issue. And that's why I'm having huge problems with the Trojan War itself. If all the Greeks went there to fight, who stayed behind to do the farming and stuff? Long story short, I don't think there were armies, not even during the palatial times. We do have records about coast guards, but I'm guessing there would be individuals who would be called to help. I don't see any myself way to find a solid argument that there were armies led by who, especially for the before the palatial times. For the slingshots, again, to my knowledge, and I'm not the best person to ask about that, I don't remember, and maybe I'm wrong, please enlighten me, slingshots in tombs. So I don't remember, for example, apart from the great elite tombs, we only have the random individual being buried with slingshots, which you may think of that. But I have to say, and I'm not doing this very often, in the later periods, like in classical, the oarsmen were in fact of the lowest class, the very poor, so they could not even afford the sling, so they could literally do the oaring. So what I'm saying is, I'm sure there are ways for them to fight, and you're very right, in the Siege-Reton, there must be sling throwers. But again, if they would own a slingshot to actually be buried with that, I don't know. If you know of any slingshots with tombs, with slingshots, please let me know. But I'm not aware of any. Sorry, very long answer. Apologies.
Oh, no, thank you. Thank you.
kind of comment on that. First of all, congrats. It was amazing. You
Thanks.
did manage in 50 minutes to say everything more or less. On the issue of the standing armies, I don't think there were standing armies. I mean, that's, I think, clear. And we do have evidence for trauma from a lot of skeletons that they're not buried with weapons. So obviously these people were the rank and file, let's say, that they would be called in arms when there was a need. And of course, because they were not members of the elite, they were not allowed to be buried with weapons.
That's a good point.
So you do have lots of evidence for trauma, combat-related trauma, in skeletons with no weapons at all. And on the contrary, you have a lot of, skeletons buried with weapons that they have no trauma at all. And actually, some of them are even kids,
If I
so
can,
it is a status thing.
okay.
It's not, the biography, let's say, of the deceased, of the weapons. It's just a status thing. They're expected to be good warriors because they're members of the elite. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they actually fought in their lives.
Thank you for that. And you did say they are actually combat related traumas, not just traumas because of something happened in the work. Okay, maybe that's your answer. If I can also say, to confuse things even more, sorry guys, there are studies, ethnographical studies in, I think, Oceania. I do not know if it is the Papua New Guinea or whatever, but there were groups, pardon me, I forget the actual name of the group, but there were tribes that the males with weapons, let's say the warriors from tribe X and tribe Z, they would meet in a common little island, like hooligans, I guess. And they would start like ceremonial war dancing, throwing the occasional spear. And the minute a person dies, the war is over, and the tribe that had that person lost, whatever this means for the economy. But literally, this is how they would fight in, again, for the life of me, I don't remember the place, in 18th century Oceania somewhere. So maybe you can add, and there was not enough time for me to go there as well, we can add this element too. So maybe there were armies, and following what Yanis just said, there were armies, there were elite people, but if they fought, it's another story. Maybe they had different codes. And again, you may apply the idea, the more you project the violence, the less war you do. But again, this is just theory, so I'm not going to go there. Yes, please.
Thank you for the talk. I had a question and a comment.
Please.
My comment is about the trade and the economics of, especially weapons grade bronze, as you keep on mentioning, after the production, the storage, and the distribution to the market, Asian market, since Greece does not have proper mines. Correct me if I'm wrong. If the islands, everything is so filled with war and people ceremoniously dying all the time, why would a supplier from Byblos or Ukraine want to send stuff to Greece or to Cyprus? Okay, from Cyprus to here. Why not just embargo the damn place and fight with stones at this point?
I think we have an embargo from the Hittites at some point. So probably this was a practice. I think if you believe the texts, I think Eric Klein mentioned that the Hittites posed an embargo on Aegean ships. So it's exactly what they're saying. So was this a case though for all times? I'm not challenging your view. I'm saying that, yeah, it makes sense.
And also, one more thought which came to me when I was hearing Dan's talks was that, okay, sure, the people don't have weapons.
Okay.
And swords are a common thing for the elites.
Okay.
But why not just sharpen a stone sling or have what's unusable to you? Like you have wood which is decomposable, stones which you can sharpen, and people have been doing it for centuries now. They have the skills, they have the traditional technologies to do it better than swinging a bronze sword, which is still unfamiliar to many people. If they want to conduct warfare so badly, why not use the traditional materials they already have? And when they die, the trauma would be from a stone weapon. And they would not place a stone weapon next to your body in a shaft grave or somewhere. They toss it away.
Yeah, this works. And no, I agree with you. You're right. Especially if you take, if you make a spear out of a wooden pole and you, as you said, sharpen it and you put it on fire, it becomes literally iron hard spear. So you're right. Maybe these individuals that Yanis mentioned, for example, about having the trauma but no weapons, they had these objects made of material that would not last, so have nothing. So you're right. Preservation is a great issue. Literally, I can see a very nice paper coming out of that about what we don't see, but it was there. The problem is it's invisible, so I cannot really say much about it. But no, it's a great thought. Thank you. I've never actually thought of this angle, so thank you. Yes, hi.
Could there be some sort of like dual level of this, like we see in the, I think it's the pre-classical Yucatan Mayan culture, where you have two different levels of warfare with a similar kind of warrior elite culture. We had sort of smaller ritualized warfare, which was the everyday sort of warfare, quite similar to what you described on the islands, where not a lot of people died, and basically just like blows were traded, and then somebody lost and somebody lost prestige or something. And then much more rarely you would have the sort of existential warfare where it's basically all the people would be called up and it was just all out war.
I don't know if there's an answer to that. Again, from the economic perspective, I find it very hard to believe that accidental warfare would exist in terms of who would risk the entire existence, the entire community to disappear if all men die. But then how many people can fight? I personally don't have an answer to that. I think we can have multiple levels of fighting. Again, the question is how you read the data. Certain people, for example, want to take iconography, and I insist on iconography because iconography can give you more information about practices than weapons, although now the use-wear analysis shows this. But many people have taken iconography literally. So they see people fighting each other. Even in the 90s, I believe, people were using the seal stones, how the individuals hold the spear, to say this is that move, that's that move. So they read the iconography perfectly. In this iconography, again, you don't see armies, you don't see huge numbers of people. Personally, I've argued, that was in my first paper as a grad student, damn it, 21 years ago, time flies, that Siege Return, the actual Westhouse Freeze, even a similar case from a later period, most likely from the same time, although found later, stone written from Epidaurus, they all depict raids rather than sieges or fights. So what I'm saying is, again, that's a lower scale fighting. Even the iconography does not suggest huge armies fighting, unlike in Egypt, unlike in the Hittites, unlike in the vassal states. So I agree, maybe there are many levels, at least two, as you mentioned, but total warfare, armies meeting and killing each other, like the phalanx later, no. Even the phalanx is quite limited, if you ask me. Yes, please.
Let's go back to iconography, if possible. What is your take? What is your interpretation on the images of Mycenaean warriors abroad? The one from the papyrus in Amarna and the one from the Hattusha shreds. What would be your historical interpretation?
Historical, okay.
Yeah. So.
Thank you for that. Actually, I removed those slides before I came because I thought that's too much. Okay, the one from Hattusha, it's really, is it Hattusha or Melito? No, it's Hattusha, you're right. If you see, it's really a small bowl and it's an engraved warrior holding a sword. People really want to call it like type A, but it's not. Anyway, really, it is a Bostas helmet, supposedly with a horn at the back, then a weird plume. I would be very much happy if it was proved that it's not a Bostas helmet. If it is, and it is the local idea, don't forget that iconography is so fluid. I mean, you have the Egyptians depicting the Syrians wearing two feathers. That's not the case. That's how the Egyptians see the Syrians. So I'm very much, I'm happy to think that this is either not a Bostas helmet, or it is a Bostas helmet made by a local artist who thought of that. By the way, many people have actually used that helmet to reconstruct Mycenaean helmets, and the result is kind of interesting, to say the least. But let's say this is a Mycenaean helmet. And also the Amarna papyrus, by the way, found in my lovely town of Liverpool. It was found there before sent to the British Museum, I believe. It's literally a small conical cap with lines. That's all. It could be reminiscent of the Bostas helmet, but maybe not. Let's take they're both indeed Egyptian and maybe Hittite artists' views of the Aegean Bostas helmet. The Bostas helmet coexists, and that's a big problem, yet another methodological problem, because when they found, for example, sorry, I'm going from back and forth, when they found the Griffin warrior combat agate, they thought people have actually written this is a Mycenaean warrior because of the helmet slaying, no, Minoan warrior, sorry, slaying 2 Mycenaeans because of the helmet. Now, the thing is that this helmet, if indeed is a Bostas helmet in Bogasgoi and Amarna, it coexists in the Cyclades, in Crete, in the mainland at the same time. You can see it in the arts. It's an Aegean thing. I'm happy to, if you ask my personal opinion, to see these helmets as ethnicity indicators, unless I'm going too far right now. And this is what the local artists thought of. Now, if they mean indeed, as I believe Eric Klein wrote in the 90s, that the Amarna papyrus depicts Mycenaeans coming to aid Egyptians versus the Nubians, I cannot say. But of course, this may explain easier why you have so much gold in Mycenae if they served as mercenaries. For the Hattusa helmet, I cannot really say this, but it is an easy way to explain historically the gold at Mycenae, the role of Mycenaeans as warriors. I mean, what else these guys give to get back all these exotic goods in the shaft graves? What did they offer apart from their services? So historically, it would serve many purposes, but artistically, I find it very hard to use those 2 case studies to discuss these events. So I'm very skeptical. I'm very happy to find more of them. I mean, they found in Tel El Dabba the famous Minoan style wall paintings. I wish they had warriors with helmets over there, so we can say more about what you just said. Does this answer your question?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I always give long answers. My bad. Yes, please.
You alluded to this in your response to Jan. It may be slightly fanciful, but could you comment a little more on the utility or non-utility of Homer as a source for your research, and conversely, how your research informs the state of our knowledge of the historicity of the style of warfare that Homer purports to witness. When you spoke about the chariots, of course, your theory of how chariots were used in Greece corresponds to how Homer describes them as a kind of taxi to the battlefield.
You realize that's another lecture, right? No, it's fine. Okay, as Angelos, I stayed away during all my studies from the Homeric epics because I think they can be misleading and I'm not an expert on them. The Bostas helmets appear both in art and material culture. You have found like 50 of them, I believe, if all the tasks are indeed from helmets, but they are all mentioned in the Homeric epics. You're correct. But also the Homeric epics refer to cremation, which is a later period, of course. I'm not sure about currency. I don't remember if coins are mentioned, but anyway, definitely there is a blend of Bronze Age and Iron Age elements. I'm not denying that. But personally, I don't think, for example, even again, economically and logistically, that you have the aristocrats going to fight their own idealized combat or duel between the 2 of them, and the armies would basically stand, which is sometimes not mentioned or hinted, but definitely I think the elites could stay away from fighting. This is literally like the Athenian cavalry, notoriously being absent from fighting, the aristocrats, by the way. So to be on the safe area, I personally, as Angelos, again, all these years, stayed away from Homer, although it's tempting to see some similarities. But because I believe, and I'm not a specialist, they've been recorded in what, the 6th century BC, Athens for the first time by Pisistratus, if this is what I've read is correct. Anyway, because they were recorded much, much later after a millennium of oral tradition, I'm not even going there to compare them, even if it's handy. I know many people do, but I feel uneasy because I think it's a whole new kind of worms. So I'm staying away on purpose, but that's me. I'm not saying it's the right one.
Eric?
Yes, thank you. I also found this very, very interesting, and I learned a lot. And
thank you.
I would like to kind of, it's a bit similar to the last question, but more, you mentioned narrative, and you mentioned in discussing iconography, and of course the linear B tablets are kind of administrative documents, but there probably was an oral tradition of some kind. So what do you think was the kind of relationship between iconography, pictures depicting fighters or warriors, and could it be something that kind of was inspired by oral tradition, or something that could set narratives in motion in this that could inspire people to tell stories, and that leads then to the question of what's the kind of back and forth between actual fighting and expectations of what fighting should be like, or what we
yeah,
I'd like to hear what you think about that.
I think I got it. Thank you. That's a lovely audience. Many tough questions, so thank you. Okay, narratives, they do exist from the at least early late Bronze Age with the siege return, as you said, and so on and so on, to the palatial narratives, definitely telling stories. Now, there are many ideas and theories about if the scenes on the smaller portable objects are actually small chunks of the bigger narrative depicted on the walls. If you notice, for example, this is why you need a more holistic approach. If you see the small portable objects, they seem to go out of function when the wall paintings come in the arena. So forgetting who has access to the wall paintings, who has access to Hall 64, who enters the throne room to see the warriors, that's a big issue, who gets the message. I think the narrative is that of fighting, is not that of the victorious winner. Although there is the victorious winner in the ceilings, seal stones, gold rings, is notoriously absent from the wall paintings. Of course, on the other hand, the wall paintings are fragmentary. So good luck with that. Maybe it's next door and we missed it. But the narrative, I think, is more of that of violence, more of that of what we can do. Even the size matters in Aegean prehistory and art. You don't have nowhere any hints of bigger figures next to smaller figures, very Near Eastern, very Egyptian. I think so. The narrative exists, but to narrate the either real life contribution of either the deceased with the portable object or the community with the monumental art, if you go for this equation. So it is more of that the power of what we can do rather than what we did. Of course, people argue if you have the same siege return scene on the wall paintings from Thera and on the stone return from Epidaurus, exactly the same thing, a boat appears on an island or a coast and attacks a city, this might have been a single event, narrating the same event, like glorifying an event. I personally think that's a generic theme. So I think they project violence and fighting, but with no specific clear winner. You don't see the Wanaks, you don't see the Loagetas. Bearing in mind the preservation factor, but again, we have so many samples with this central figure missing. I really think it's the narrative is to show power rather than victory. Make sense? Thank you.
I think we have a couple of questions.
I just want to add something to that.
Please.
I mean, as far as warrior ethos is concerned, I think we have to differentiate between the pre-palatial, the post-palatial, and the palatial period. I mean, you do have some evidence for this warrior ethos being portrayed in the art and the finds themselves in the pre-palatial and the post-palatial period.
Okay.
In the palatial period, you have almost an absence. You know, you do have a few frescoes in the palaces, so in warfare, but you know, you don't have the evidence or the amount of evidence that you have before and after the palaces. So you cannot treat the whole late Bronze Age as one same thing.
I agree. I would only add that regarding the narratives were present, it's the fighting that you see, not the victory. But you're right, in 3C, you don't have any narratives, although again, new data, the brand new publication of the hand-shaken created from Tyrins, literally 2 warriors are shaking hands in front of walls. Think like, whoa, that's very Homeric, by the way. That's very different story. So again, let me escape this, what you correctly said. Definitely, you cannot have the entire Bronze Age as the same ideology. Whenever you have narrative, this narrative is not for the victor, if this allows me to slip away. But you're very right.
Just a final comment, final question.
Angela, thank you for this enlightening lecture. Actually, the idea of armed individuals protecting trade routes was accepted or put forward in quite a recent paper, I think, by Jennifer Webb in studying weapons from Lapithos on the north coast of Cyprus. These are excavations done by Menelaos Markiris, as you know, in the early 20th century. And thankfully, the material was transferred in Nicosia in the Cyprus Museum. So, when studying weapons from these tombs, she accepted also this theory because Lapithos on the north coast had connections with Central Cyprus, of course, and so on. So, she put forward this idea of individuals protecting the trade routes.
Perfect.
Weapons found in those tombs.
If Jenny suggested that, that's even bigger a smile for me because she's an amazing archaeologist. So thanks for that. Didn't know about that, which is a pity. I should have known, but thank you. I'll check the paper. Thank you so much. I know he's been working in Lapithos material for years now. So excellent. Thank you, Jenny.
Time for a glass of wine.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much for.
Thank you, everybody.